They called her a paper soldier, a desk jockey, a placeholder, just another forgotten name in the system until the day her sleeve rolled up. That's when they saw it. 9 marks, burned into her skin. Not tattoos, not decoration, scars, ritual, a death toll written in flesh. Every line is a life taken to save others. Every mark earned in silence where no medals ever reached. The laughter died that day. The rumors choked on truth, and the myth they mocked walked straight through them, alive, breathing, and undeniable. If that gave you chills, you haven't heard the full story yet. Subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Fort Grayson wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. It sat in the quiet middle tier of military infrastructure, too active to be forgotten, too procedural to be glorified. Most days passed in the rhythm of forms, folders, and formatted reports, with the occasional burst of simulated chaos during scheduled war games. It was the kind of base where careers plateaued, and where soldiers learned how to fill out evaluations faster than they learned to field strip a rifle. That's where she showed up. Sergeant Lorna Briggs arrived just after morning formation, stepping off the shuttle in a regulation duffel and boots that had seen better wars. No welcome party, no fanfare. Just a quiet reassignment order and a nod from the transport sergeant. She moved like someone used to being overlooked and perfectly comfortable with it. Her uniform was clean, pressed, but not new. Her name tape had frayed edges, and the creases in her sleeves weren't from starch, they were muscle memory. She walked with an unhurried precision through admin logistics, her orders folded neatly in her hand. Behind the front desk, a private no older than 22 took one look at her and smirked. "You lost, ma'am?" he asked, eyes flicking over her subdued demeanor and gray-threaded hair. She didn't answer, just placed the orders on the desk and waited. Within an hour, word had already started to circulate. A sergeant from some forgotten division, probably logistics. No ribbons, no combat patch. Reassigned to the training admin office, where careers go to die. The nickname surfaced before noon. Paper soldier, whispered with that cocky confidence, only possessed by those who'd never had to bleed for what they wore, the kind of label that makes lesser men feel taller. Briggs said nothing, didn't react. She found her desk, her assigned quarters, and filed away what she needed to know. She moved through the corridors like background noise efficient, unbothered, forgotten by design. She heard the nickname. Of course she did. She just didn't correct it. She didn't need to, because they hadn't seen her arm yet, and the moment they did, the word paper would burn in their mouths like smoke. The break room at Fort Grayson was exactly what you'd expect overlit, undercleaned, always 5 degrees too cold. The coffee tasted like rust and regret, and the vending machine had been out of cherry electrolyte packs for 3 months straight. It was a place for downtime built on speculation. That's where it started. Briggs didn't talk much. She nodded when spoken to, offered short answers when necessary, but never filled the silence with stories or half-earned boasts. She ate quietly, drank her coffee black, and left without lingering. She never sat with the same group twice, not out of aloofness, just precision. She wasn't there to make friends. She was there because the orders said she had to be. And people noticed, but didn't understand. No unit patch, no visible ribbons off duty, no photos taped to her locker. She didn't dress up for casual Fridays or join in on the softball league. A couple of younger sergeants whispered that she was probably someone's aunt, pulled in on a nepotism waiver. A lieutenant from Ops, a desk-bound officer with more opinions than deployments, chuckled one afternoon and said, "I bet she spent 20 years proofreading field manuals. Probably corrected punctuation in the Geneva Conventions." They laughed. The kind of safe, easy laughter people indulge in when they think they're smarter than someone who doesn't push back. Someone checked her record, a junior specialist in HR. Nothing sensitive, just the basic access. What came up made no sense: along gaps, odd station points, frequent inter-unit transfers, and a strange lack of commendations for someone with that much time in service. The file read like a resume, edited for plausible deniability. Maybe she just coasted, someone said. Not everyone's a warfighter. Maybe she ghosted through, someone else joked, tapping their ID badge against the break room fridge like it owed them answers. No one asked Briggs directly. No one invited her in. They just assumed. That's the thing about silence. In a room full of noise, it doesn't just stand out, it unsettles. They didn't know what to make of her. But they knew she wasn't like them, and that made them nervous. They gave her the war games because no one else wanted them. Joint urban simulation, multi-branch, week-long rotation with 4 platoons, 2 OP4 teams, and a dozen brass ready to critique every delay like it was a congressional hearing. The kind of assignment that chewed up planning officers and spit out apologies. Logistics, communications, ammunition controls, casualty scripting, safety protocols, all moving pieces in a clock nobody had time to fix. So they gave it to the paper soldier. Briggs accepted the binder without flinching. She read the brief, nodded once, and got to work. No complaints, no questions, just lists, plans, routing diagrams. Every unit assigned to the exercise got a schedule breakdown by 800 the next morning. Every fire team had a lane. Every instructor had their orders. Every blank round was accounted for, boxed, and tagged. The younger officers rolled their eyes. "She's treating this like an op in Kandahar," one captain muttered, leafing through her updated incident protocol with mock reverence. "It's just war games, not war crimes." Another, a lieutenant with perfect hair and zero humility, grinned as he dropped a stack of her laminated checklists onto his desk. "Relax, Sarge, this isn't Baghdad." She didn't answer. Didn't bother correcting them. She'd been somewhere worse. She'd been in places where the map was drawn in blood, where comms failed and reinforcements never came. Places where you learned to pack for contingencies they didn't teach at the academy. Where timelines slipped not because of paperwork but because people bled out on the floor. So Nosh didn't smile. She checked the box labels. She reviewed the training safeties. She walked the mock village perimeter twice herself before signing off on the live blank zones. She didn't assume anything. Assumptions got people killed. Even in training, they thought she was overcompensating. But the truth was simpler. Briggs wasn't preparing for a drill. She was preparing in case it wasn't one. The training floor smelled like sweat, rubber, and half-washed ambition. Industrial fans pushed warm air across the scuffed mats, and fluorescent lights cast everything in that off-white hue that flattened skin and deepened shadows. Pre-rotation assessments were standard close-quarters drills, conditioning gauntlets, a quick scan to make sure no one would collapse mid-scenario. Everyone had to run it, no exceptions. Even Briggs. Her name was on the roster like everyone else. No asterisk, no exemption. She showed up at 600 sharp, same boots, same neutral expression, same quiet gait that carried no apology and asked for no recognition. The others were already stretching, warming up, filling the air with bravado and loud opinions. "Wait, she's doing this?" someone said. "That can't be right. It's not even safe. Hope they brought extra gauze for the grandma." Laughter followed, too loud for the size of the joke, the kind that needs approval more than it earns it. She stepped onto the mat without comment, her sleeves rolled tight, compression wraps firm at her wrists, no bounce in her step, no flashy stretches, just stillness, like she was measuring the space with her breath. The first drill was reactive movement dodge, block, counter. She didn't just pass, she redefined it. Her motion wasn't flashy, it was surgical. No wasted energy, no tells. Like she already knew where the strike would land before it was thrown. Then came the gauntlet. 4 stations, full-speed contact, light gear. The goal wasn't to win, it was to assess response time, control, endurance. The first opponent came in fast, a younger specialist with something to prove. Briggs pivoted, redirected, and put him down so cleanly that even the instructor blinked. The second tried to press her with size. She used his weight against him and rolled him off the mat. Third and fourth didn't fare any better. She didn't break a sweat. They stopped laughing. Somewhere near the exit, one corporal whispered, "She moves like she's been here before." Someone else, quieter, "Like the fight already happened, and she's just walking through the memory." No one offered her gauze. No one offered her anything. They just watched. Because something had shifted, and they all felt it. It happened somewhere between the second and third round. Briggs had just reset on the mat after neutralizing a younger opponent with the kind of throw that didn't look like much until he hit the ground gasping. Her breathing was even, her stance relaxed. She moved like a woman, with nowhere to be but fully prepared to be everywhere at once. No strain, no rush, just presence. Then her sleeve shifted. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just a slight slide of fabric, the compression giving way. As she reached down to adjust her wrist wrap, that's when it showed just for a second. A mark. Thin, vertical, red, but not fresh, healed over with the kind of permanence that didn't fade. It wasn't ink. It wasn't decorative. It was burned imprecise, intentional, the line of something that had meaning beyond anything cosmetic. Someone near the benches squinted. "What is that? A tattoo? Looks like one of those tribal designs. Old school. Maybe it's from a unit or something. Just noise. Just guesses. But not for everyone." Corporal Elkins, third-year medic, stopped mid-laugh. He'd been joking with the others not 10 seconds earlier, poking fun at how Briggs had folded a private in half without blinking. But when he saw that mark, when he saw exactly how straight it was, how uniform it knocked the air out of his lungs. He'd seen it before. Once. Years back. It was in a medical dossier flagged "Do Not Copy" across the top. An old black file that came through during a high-clearance trauma case, burn trauma across forearm, uniform width, multiple repetitions. The explanation had been redacted. The context blacked out. But the field note? That had stayed. Kill record. Non-standard. Ritualized. Verified. Echo designation. Elkins had assumed it was a mistake, or a myth, or some ghost story passed down through the wrong channels. But now, looking at Briggs, at the way she moved, the silence in her eyes, she wasn't so sure. He didn't say anything. Not yet. But he stopped laughing. Because there was a difference between stories you heard and the kind that walked past you, still breathing. It started like most things do in a place like Fort Grayson, low murmurs in high corners, the quiet shuffle of doubt pushing its way through habit. After the training floor incident, people didn't laugh when Briggs walked by. They didn't stop talking either. They just lowered their voices. The mark on her arm had done something that rank alone never could. It made them pay attention. A few of them started digging. Not officially, just quiet taps through backdoor channels. Someone in records owed someone else a favor. Someone in signals had an old clearance. A few keystrokes here, a pulled file there. Nothing classified, nothing actionable. Just enough to confirm what no one wanted to say out loud. Her file didn't match her years. 23 years in service. No campaign medals, no commendation clusters, no deployment ribbons. Just an unremarkable ribbon rack that wouldn't fill a postcard. But then came the oddities: reassignments that didn't follow promotion paths, gaps marked admin leave that lasted months, transfers to units that didn't exist on current rosters, reports that started strong and then cut off mid-page. Her record didn't trail off. It vanished, right where the good ones usually do. At first, they tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd been in logistics during the drawdown. Maybe she rotated through medical support. Maybe she was just unlucky. But the more they looked, the more they stopped pretending. One staff sergeant stared at the chain of reassignments and muttered, "This doesn't look like admin. This looks like insertion prep." Someone else older, quieter, nodded. "I saw a record like this once. Belonged to a guy they swore didn't exist. Paper soldier? No one called her that now. Not to her face, not in whispers, not even as a joke. Because paper doesn't burn the way those marks did. Because reports don't vanish like shadows when you shine the wrong kind of light on them. And because somewhere between the nameplate and the silence, people began to realize they'd been looking at the kind of history that doesn't get printed. It gets buried. And sometimes, it walks back in. The round table was supposed to be routine. Briefings, dry erase markers, acronyms tossed around like poker chips. A dozen officers and senior NCOs crammed into a windowless operations room, lit by flickering fluorescence and stale ambition. They were preparing for the next phase of the war game's emergency extraction protocols, simulated casualty events, coordinated response drills. It was Lieutenant Carter who made the mistake. He was fresh from Fort Sam, sharp uniform, sharper tone. He spoke with the conviction of someone who had never been contradicted, pointing at the map projected on the screen like it owed him deference. His emergency evac route ran clean through a canyon grid that on paper was optimal, but only on paper. Briggs sat near the end of the table, arms crossed, a pen tucked behind her ear. She waited until he finished. Then she spoke. "That corridor floods during late melt," she said. "You'll bottleneck 3 units if the weather shifts." Carter turned, blinking. "That's not in the simulation parameters." "It's not in the simulation," she said. "It's in the ground." He chuckled, that hollow kind of laugh meant to dismiss and display all at once. "Sergeant, I think I've got a handle on terrain." Briggs didn't flinch, didn't blink. She stood, slow and calm, and stepped forward. Then, without a word, she rolled up her sleeve. Deliberately. 9 marks. Vertical, evenly spaced, scarred deep into the skin, not decorative, not aesthetic, burned in with a hand that knew the cost of permanence. The room went still. Whatever Carter was about to say died behind his teeth. Major Renshaw, seated beside him, straightened in his chair. One of the sergeants exhaled softly, like he hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. Even the hum of the projector seemed quieter. Briggs didn't explain, didn't offer context. She just stood there, sleeve up, eyes steady. Because this wasn't a rebuttal. It was a reckoning. She let them look, let them feel the weight of their assumptions evaporate. Then she rolled her sleeve back down, sat, and resumed her notes. The room didn't recover. Because once you see marks like that, you stop asking who someone is. You start wondering what they survived to still be here. The door opened mid-sentence. Major Theodore Marks stepped into the room with the practiced indifference of a man used to being late for things that couldn't start without him. Clipboard in one hand, steaming coffee in the other. He nodded at no one in particular and moved toward the head of the table. Then he stopped. It wasn't dramatic. No dropped mug or gasps. Just the kind of full-body pause that comes when the past reaches out and taps you on the shoulder. Briggs was still standing, her sleeve still rolled, the 9 marks still visible in the cold, fluorescent light. She hadn't sat back down yet, hadn't moved. Her face was calm, unbothered. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Marks didn't look at her face either. Not at first. His eyes were locked on her arm. 9 vertical scars. Not ink, not accidental. Precise. Ritualistic. His breath caught. Not from surprise, but from memory. He'd seen those marks before. Not on her. Not in a room full of command planners. But years ago, in a dust-choked valley where GPS went dark and the rules of engagement bent to the wind, there had been another woman. Smaller. Meaner. Eyes like broken ice and a rifle that never missed. She'd moved through the brush like a shadow and left silence in her wake. They'd never said her name out loud, not on comms, not even around the fire. She'd only ever been one thing. Breaker. The word escaped his mouth before he could think. Soft. Reverent. Breaker. Every head in the room turned. Briggs didn't flinch. Major Marks blinked like he was waking from a fever dream. He looked up at her face, now older. Sure. Lines at the corners of her mouth. A gray streak cutting through her tied-back hair. But the eyes were the same. Still calm. Still watching. Still here. No one else in the room knew what the name meant, but they all heard how he said it. The way a man speaks when he realizes a myth is still alive. Briggs looked at him for a long second, then rolled her sleeve back down, and sat. The office was quiet, not sterile like most of Fort Grayson's admin blocks, but lived in. Books stacked sideways, papers clipped together in neat chaos, a faded map of regions that didn't exist on tourist brochures pinned above a locked file cabinet. Major Marks stood behind his desk, arms folded, expression unreadable. Briggs entered without knocking. He'd left the door cracked on purpose. He didn't ask her to sit. She did anyway. Back straight, boots flat, hands resting lightly on her knees. The same way she'd sat through every mission brief that didn't exist, every debrief that would never be recorded. Except this time, there was no op order, just memory, and maybe something closer to acknowledgement. Mark studied her for a long moment before speaking. No clipboard, no rank in his voice. Just the heavy pause of a man trying to say the right thing without saying too much. "They buried your file deep," he said finally. "Took me a minute to realize." Briggs said nothing. Her expression didn't change. "But I remember Coast," he continued. "The compound raid. We were 5 hours late getting out. Should have lost half the team." She blinked once. "You were already gone by the time we exfilled," he said. "Only reason we weren't zippered into body bags was the bodies you'd left behind." Still, she didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "I just wanted to say, we noticed." Eventually. Briggs tilted her head slightly. Not disbelief. Not sarcasm. Just tired. Marks leaned forward. His voice dropped. "I know you won't get medals for what you did. I know your record's full of holes that won't ever be filled. But people are walking around right now breathing, living, home because you were where you were." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, something shifted. Not in her face, not in her posture, but somewhere beneath it all. Like the weight she'd carried for years had been adjusted, not lifted, but balanced now by the rarest thing a soldier like her ever received. Recognition. Not the parade kind. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need applause, just eye contact and truth. Briggs nodded once. It was enough. The hallway was the same. Same scuffed linoleum floors. Same humming vents. Same burnt coffee tang leaking from the break room 2 doors down. But everything felt different now, tilted, quiet. Like the building itself had remembered something it wasn't supposed to. Briggs moved down the corridor like always, calm, efficient, no wasted motion. Boots steady, sleeves rolled down, duffel slung over one shoulder. She passed the open break room without a glance. Inside, conversation stopped. The same room where they'd once laughed, where they'd called her paper soldier between bites of vending machine jerky and lukewarm coffee, where her silence had been mistaken for irrelevance. Nobody laughed now. Nobody dared. Lieutenant Carter was seated near the far window, tablet in his lap, posture tense. He stood when he saw her, not sharply, not like a practice drill, just slow, unsure, but respectful in a way that mattered more than precision. His arm raised in a salute that didn't quite reach his temple before he caught himself, faltered, and simply held it there in unfinished gesture to a truth he still didn't fully understand. Briggs didn't stop, didn't break stride, but her eyes met him for just a moment, and she nodded. That was all. The silence that followed her down the hall wasn't heavy. It wasn't awkward. It was reverent, the kind of stillness you feel in sacred spaces, not because of what's said, but because of what isn't. Because some stories don't get told in words or ribbons. Some are carried in the way someone walks. In this way, scars don't need ink to speak volumes. She exited the building like she had 100 times before. But this time, no one dismissed her. No one whispered behind their mugs. They just watched. And maybe they finally saw her. Not as a relic, not as a rumor, but as what she'd always been. A reminder that real strength doesn't demand attention. It earns silence. The kind you don't break. The kind that stays with you.